and one of the channels I've subscribed to and I highly recommend to you, and I'll put the links up in the side, is Intro2the1, and she's a Jet. I might say her name wrong. I believe it's Alafia. And you know, it's good, I think, if you're coming on Jet or thinking about living in Japan, to get lots of different perspectives. And she certainly has some different experiences than me. She's a woman. She's African American. She's younger than I am, obviously. She lives in a different part of Japan. And she's only been here 1 year. I think she's staying another year. She can correct me if she watches this in the comments. But I think at one point she was thinking of going home and is now staying, but I'm not sure. Anyway, I'll put this as a response to her video, although I should say that I enjoy her channel, and like I said, I recommend her channel. This is not really an attack on her. There's going to be two parts of this response. One kind of talking about specific things she said, and the second part is going to be talking more about kind of a semantics thing, and I'm not real. It's about things that she does like about Japan and things that she doesn't like about Japan. And this is a good idea for me to do too, and I'll probably do it when I go back to America. And one of the things she comes up with, I just happen to disagree with. One of the things she talks about is her students, and how they have no imagination, how they don't create art, how they don't think for themselves. And this is obviously her opinion, her perception, and that's valid. But I think there's a worry sometimes when you make blanket statements about Japanese children don't have imaginations or something like that. So I think she would be the first to admit that she's had a limited experience. She teaches at however many schools she teaches at. She teaches a certain amount of students, and she's only been here for 1 year. I think my kids are incredibly creative, incredibly talented. I'm constantly amazed at things that they're able to do. And while I don't have a lot of experience teaching a similar age group in America, the sheer number of kids that can draw, that can play an instrument, that excel at sports, all across the school, just constantly amazes me. So I'm really not sure where she's coming from with this. First of all, Japan is the country. What is the one thing that most young people think of when they think of Japan? It's anime and manga. So to say that Japanese people or Japanese children are not artistic or don't create is ridiculous. It's a country that's known for its art, and it's its biggest export in a way. The kids, you know, don't maybe freely create, I don't know, all the time, but when they're asked to do art projects and stuff, the stuff they come up with is incredible. There's a thing called Sports Day, which I'm sure she did right as she became a Jet. And they make these incredible huge like posters for their color teams with just amazing drawings on them in paint, and you know, they're huge. They're amazing. Something called Culture Festival, Bunkasai. Every year the kids make these huge, huge art projects. And they're amazing. One year they made this, you know how like the origami crane, they made a huge like full scale, like it was like the size of like, I don't even know, like an airplane. It was huge. Origami crane hanging from the ceiling of the gym. Or last year they made this patchwork like mosaic painting made from all these individual post-it notes that made a huge pumpkin. So, you know, they have art projects. I did a whole video about it, but I think it might be taken down now. So I just don't know where that's coming from. The kids in my elementary schools, I'm always going there and seeing all their art plastered all over the walls. Of course, in a way, you can look at kanji, and the calligraphy they do as art. The kids are constantly drawing and showing me their drawings. Kids really want to be mangaka, you know, comic book artists. I think you just haven't maybe spent enough time with your kids at recess or at lunch or something and looked in their notebooks or I don't know, because my kids are incredibly artistic, incredibly creative, and they express it all the time. The other thing you talked about was how the kids don't think for themselves, and I completely understand where this frustration is coming from. You'll ask a kid something relatively simple like, "What's your name?" And they'll literally turn around to the kid sitting behind them and go, "Hey." But what I don't think you realize sometimes as a first-year jet, and I'm not trying to sound high and mighty here, so excuse me if I am, but is they're not turning around to ask, what's my name, to the person sitting next to them. But Japanese children and Japanese adults that I've had experience with are very worried about making a mistake. So they're turning around to confirm with their friends that what you said to them is, "What's your name?" or, "What's the weather like today?" And they're like, "Hey, kyou no tenki dou desu ka?" They're confirming the question so they give the proper response. They're not necessarily asking for the answer, because the fear of making a mistake is very prevalent here. So yes, there is a communal way of thinking for many things, but I still think your kids are more individualistic than you perhaps give them credit for. And perhaps some of that is because as a first-year jet, who I think admittedly you've said that you don't speak that much Japanese or as much as you'd like, perhaps you haven't been able to talk to them in Japanese. And as I stayed longer and I was more able to talk to my kids, their personalities emerge more and more when you're able to talk to them in Japanese. And they do, have their own thoughts and opinions, and some of them, want to be expressive, creative people, but maybe in things that you had never thought of. Like there's no drama club at our schools, but a lot of kids really, if you talk to them, would love to be a voice actor. Now this isn't something that you would talk to American kids and they would have any desire to do, but in Japan, being a voice actor for anime is a very highly regarded thing, and a lot of kids are really fans, literally fans of the people who do the voices in the cartoons. So there's all kinds of other outlets that perhaps you just haven't come to see yet, because maybe you haven't been able to have good conversations with your kids in Japanese. The kids, there is a lot of, making sure that everybody in the group is happy. But again, I think there's a danger in applying Western standards to another culture. In your videos, sometimes you'll say Japanese, for instance, Japanese kids are not creative. Well, you can't really make that statement, because you've only known 400, 1,000, however many kids you've known in your rural community. To blanketly state that all kids in the entire 4 islands of Japan and Okinawa are not creative is obviously a statement you can't accurately make. So I realize that you're not going to want to preface every sentence with "in my experience" or "amongst the students I've taught" or something like that. But I think there's a real danger sometimes with J-vloggers, and this goes beyond just Intro2the1 to many of us, who make blanket statements. The Japanese do this, or Japanese people don't do this. And, the experience of all the Japan vloggers that live in Tokyo or Osaka is so different than my Japan. And so I'm guilty of it too. I do it sometimes in my videos. I made a video about parking a couple weeks ago, and I say Japanese people love to back in. Well, in my 5 years, I've kind of bore that out to be true, but I still don't know. Maybe in Hokkaido they don't. Maybe everybody pulls in front first. I don't know. I haven't been everywhere in Japan. So I think there's a danger in making blanket statements about Japanese people do this or something, when you have a limited experience. I've even in 5 years had a limited experience. So to say that Japanese kids, can't express themselves, aren't creative, I just think is misguided. And perhaps if you do stay another year, you'll find that that perception of yours changes. And to other J-vloggers, I guess I would just warn you about, you know, when we make these videos about big subjects like racism or, you know, things that people are interested in hearing about living in Japan, you have to be careful not to make, you know, just broad sweeping generalizations about a whole populace that you personally don't really have that much experience with. I know you can extrapolate, but it's just as bad as people meeting me and assuming that my personal quirks, I don't eat fish, I don't drink coffee, are true of everybody in America. You know, oh, I thought Americans like sushi. They do, I just don't. You know, and so you might have met a Japanese person that does something one way, but it's not necessarily true of everybody. So yeah, I think that's about it. Again, I do enjoy your videos and I enjoy getting a different perspective. I like watching a lot of different J-vloggers and seeing how we're all taking in what I think is a very wonderful country. And if you do stay a second year, ganbatte. I hope you have a great second year on JET. And everybody, of course, as always, thanks for watching. Bye.